Now, to take a look at the current situation in Ukraine, and particularly that military angle, we're going to speak now to Dr. Gavin Hall. He's a teaching fellow in political science and international security at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. Thank you very much for your time. Very good of you to join us, Dr. Hall. I want to start by talking about what looks to be a little bit of a shift, or at least a halt, shall we say, in a momentum which had appeared to build up. About 3 weeks ago, on the second anniversary of this invasion, Ukraine seemed pretty stuck. And now we have this series of drone strikes aiming at key infrastructure targets, and importantly, they're going right into Russian territory. Is this a bit of a breakthrough on the Ukrainian side, would you say?
Good afternoon. I'll start with saying, whilst I think most people would quite like it to be a breakthrough or a start of a breakthrough, it's probably not a decisive breakthrough. Whether at this moment it may well proceed and build up to being decisive, but I don't think that's an analysis that can be made at the moment. Whilst it's true that Ukraine's sort of offensive at the end of last year has sort of stalled and not really gained too much ground, similarly, Russian offences earlier on this year hadn't really been gaining much ground. But even whilst these incursions were going on into Russia itself yesterday, Russian forces were still making gains on the ground in and around Bakhmut and Donetsk and things. So there is still Russian pressure that's building and participating on the ground. Where I think these attacks actually directly into Russia are particularly interesting is because obviously you have the upcoming Russian presidential elections, but demonstrating a capability and also a willingness to strike directly into Russia in a coordinated manner, which hasn't really been seen before, is an attempt to show a significant show of strength and also ability and desire for Ukraine to be able to carry on the fighting. And I suppose the hope is that people going to the polls would take this into consideration. Not that I expect anything else other than a decisive victory for Vladimir Putin in these elections.
I'm just talking about that public opinion issue. It looks very much as though there's some kind of strategy to cause greater disruption within Russia in the hope that perhaps public opinion might turn slightly, though, as you say, it is almost certainly going to result in a win for Putin when the elections come. We've been hearing about these Russian but anti-Kremlin units operating within Ukraine and crossing over. They stormed the borders recently. What do we know about those people, and are they much of a worry to Putin?
They're probably not much of a worry or a concern to him. I mean, the numbers are not that significant. They have been incorporated into Ukraine's military chain of command and operate just like other partisan pro-Ukrainian groups. They were involved in the middle of last year in limited incursions into Belarus, which didn't really result in any significant gains. They sort of stayed for a couple of days and then retreated back. And we might well see similar things taking place now. There are reports of limited cross-border incursions into the Belgrade and Kursk regions, which border Ukraine. And again, it's very likely to be limited incursions and may well see a pullback. But I think it's part of the signalling the desire and the willingness that if the conflict was to continue, despite the nuclear rhetoric that Vladimir Putin's also had in the past 24 hours, Ukraine is willing and can potentially expand the fight into targeting Russia directly, which is something it's been keen to avoid so far.
Do they have enough long-range missiles? I mean, we know they don't. What does their strategy still need in order to continue with what looks like a bit of a positive stage of the war from the Ukrainian point of view?
ultimately, the one thing that Ukraine really needs to be able to carry on fighting Russia, whether that's in a defensive or an offensive capacity, but just to be able to carry on fighting, they do still require substantial Western help and assistance from the allies there. So I noted that the American National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan yesterday announced an additional 300 million. Vladimir President Macron will be meeting the president of Lithuania later on this week to discuss how efforts to ramp up supplies and equipment to Ukraine can best be managed. And I think partly from that, and given the statements a couple of weeks ago from President Macron that maybe supplying troops directly into Ukraine should be something on the Western agenda, I think that's clear that Macron is trying to position France as the dominant key player within European security and trying to sort of take the lead on this. Much like Putin, I think he's got French president elections over the summer in mind with this.